Hello, this is James from the DSO Imager channel, and tonight we're going to process someone else's data. So Joe from Joe's Astrophotography and Glenn from Astrobloke recently collaborated on an image of the Bubble Nebula, and they made their data available. If you go to their videos, the links for the data is in their description, and anybody can process this data, and they wanted to see what other people could do with it. So tonight we'll go ahead and run through this data and see what we get. So here are the stacked channels. We've got our sulfur right here, and there's our O3 and the HA, and I just put all three in the LRGB combination tool, and this is what I ended up with. So the first thing I did was I run dynamic background extraction, which gave me this one here. And I also ran a noise reduction. So after running the noise reduction, I extracted the luminance and I ran deconvolution against it. And so you can see what the deconvolution did. I'll zoom in really close. This is with it with deconvolution applied, and that's without it. So the stars look better with it, and look at the detail in the nebula here. So without and with. Without, with. So it does a pretty nice job. I almost always run deconvolution. The only time I may give it a pass is if I'm working with a shorter focal length. Now I'm kind of running through these steps very quickly. If anyone's interested in seeing specifically how I do everything, please check out my two-part series on PixInsight processing, where I go through a very specific steps. So rather than repeat these steps for each video, I'm just demonstrating the workflow here. Alright, so anyway, after my luminance is ready, I add it back to the color, and this is what I ended up with. Now, usually, the next step that I do is stretch it, and this one's already stretched. In this case, I just use the auto stretch, and then I run StarNet so that I can work on the stars separately from the nebula, and that's where I ran into a problem. And we can see it here. So this is with the stars removed. It doesn't look too bad. We have some artifacts behind, but if we zoom in, yeah, that's not going to work. I decided to proceed with processing it to see how it would look after I add the stars back. Maybe I could clean this up afterwards. If you watch Joe's video, he actually created a mask that protected this star when he did StarNet, and so he didn't get this artifact here, and I really should have listened or replicated that step, because I tried to process it, and what I ended up with the final image is this here. And I mean, there's a couple problems with this image here. So the main one here is that this artifact is still here, and so I'm just gonna have to do this over. This isn't I can't let this stand. And you'll notice it's pretty grainy here. I think I pushed it a little bit too much. And also the stars, I'm not crazy how these stars are looking. They're kind of fuzzy. So now if you've seen some of my other videos, you know I advocate sitting on an image for a day or so and then come back and make sure you're happy with it before you release it, publish it, or whatever. And so in this case, I knew this wasn't going to be declared finished like this, but I left it for a day, and came back, and oops, not that one, this one here, and I created the mask. So unlike I didn't do just protect these larger stars. I went ahead and just protected this whole area. I didn't want to take any chances. And here's what the star list looks like. So we still have the stars in the center, and I figure, you know what, these are fine. I can work around these stars without too much of a problem, and getting the rest of the stars out of there will be good enough. But we still have some really strong artifacts left behind. So StarNet does this, and Joe kind of talked about this in his video. You get this kind of hexagonal pattern here. Now, a lot of times when you add the stars back in, they go back in these spots, and you usually don't see this. Sometimes you may see a little bit around the edges. But in this particular image, there's some really strong ones. And I think they contributed to the fuzziness of my previous attempt. So I went ahead and took this picture, or this image, into Photoshop, and I used the healing brush to take care of these artifacts here. Now in PixInsight, if you choose to stay in PixInsight, you can use a clone stamp tool, but the healing brush actually is a little bit easier to use, and I think it does a better job. The risk with the healing brush is that it can alter the structure behind it, but I mean, since we're just doing this to take care of these artifacts here, and the stars are going right back on top of whatever the healing brush does, I don't think it really detracts from the image at all. And so let's see. Yeah, so this is stretched, and this is the one that I call healed. So this is where I applied the healing brush, and I left the artifacts for the smaller stars. I wasn't too worried about. It was mostly these bigger ones that I wanted to clean up. So you can see, I mean, it's not perfect, and it left some of this around here. I wanted to go really light with that healing brush, and I figure when I put the stars back on there, it's gonna clean that stuff out up. So anyway, here's our healed image. So the next step is to really do all the work with curves and adjust the colors and everything. And so this version here, we can actually step through all the different changes I made. So I inverted the image, I removed the magenta, and it looks like in this one I actually took some of the blue out. So you see how yellow it is in this area? Invert the image, the yellow is now blue. Use the SCNR tool to remove some blue. I don't remember how much I did, probably 40-50%, something like that. Invert it back, see how it's changed. So we get a little bit more of the green back, and we get this nice bronzy orange color. And then just more work with curves. And I think this is where I ended up with. Alright, so here is a little bit more work on there. I use an unsharp mask. The unsharp mask reintroduces some noise, so you gotta be really light. But I think it did a nice job. I think in this case it was a good compromise. So at this point I decided to work on the stars, and here's what the stars look like. Now even though I had a mask protecting it, it still picked up some part of that center area in the bubble. So I used this is where I used the clone stamp in PixInsight just to remove this, because I don't want to put this back in there. And yeah, there it is, it's gone. So resized the stars a little bit just by pulling back on curves. This is where I'm inverting. Use SCNR tool to remove green, invert back, so notice the greens, the magenta is gone now. And this is where I'm increasing saturation. Did it a couple of steps. And so what the thing is, on my last run, those stars were kind of fuzzy, You can see they're still kind of fuzzy here. So this is something I don't normally do, but I wondered if I could use unsharp mask on the stars. So I tried that, and I created a little preview, and I played with this a little bit and applied unsharp mask to see how it would look, and I think it came out okay. So here's the end result. So the stars are sharpened just a little bit. They're not quite as fuzzy as they were before. And this is what I used to recombine the image. And here we go. That's my final image. Joe and Glenn's data of the Bubble Nebula. So it was fun. I've never really imaged this. I imaged it once before. Last year I did a 2-panel mosaic with my ASI 533 and the L Extreme filter with a 70mm refractor. And even then it was a challenging target. So I think the Bubble Nebula just happens to be one of those tougher targets out there to process. So anyway, here's what I got. I'd love to hear what people think, and you know, if you haven't, you should maybe give this a try. That data is nice quality data, and it's available, and you guys can process it and then share it with everyone. Let Joe and Glenn know, and they'll go through those submissions. You can find links on my featured channel. I have both Joe's Astrophotography and Astrobloke featured on there, so you can just click on that and go to their channels. But odds are, if you're seeing this on my channel, you're probably already subscribed to those guys. Alright, thanks a lot, and clear skies.